Hello and welcome to Rethink's podcast on outsourcing MLRO. I'm joined by Gail, the Partner and Director of Compliance. My name's David and I am the Partner and Director of CFO and Tax Services for the same company. So the world of regulations has been changing rapidly recently, hasn't it, Gail? Can you give us some idea?
It has. Good morning, David. Yes, it has changed quite a bit. In recent years, rules around the firms protecting themselves from money laundering and terrorist financing has really become stringent and a little bit more complex.
Okay, and what about the role of the money laundering reporting officer, the MLRO as we call it?
That pertains to really policing AML. And so the role definitely is one that encompasses compliance professionals overseeing what the firm's doing in relation to anti-money laundering, countering terrorist financing in accordance with all rules, regulations, and guidance, depending on what free zone or whether they're in the mainland.
Okay, so I think they're also involved in the mandatory issuance of serious activity reports, SARS. So can you explain what one of those are?
Sure. So a suspicious activity report or suspicious transaction report, as it is interchangeably noted as, is a report that must be filed with the appropriate financial investigative unit within the person's country. For us here, it's with the central bank. And the firm must do that when they suspect, or they have reasonable grounds for knowing or suspecting that a person or an entity that they're dealing with is engaged or attempting to launder money or terrorist financing through their organization or themselves. So from a practical perspective, it's where, for example, the director or the senior executive officer has to have, effectiveness and appropriateness in looking at what sort of business relationship is being set up and to have screening done to ensure that the individual or the entity that's coming in is not one that is under a UN sanction or an international government sanction, and basically be sure that they're not dealing with someone unscrupulous who's trying to use them. A lot of times you find that that's how people try to wash the money, basically. Even through their lawyers, they try, pay them with proceeds of their illicit gains, etc. And that is how they get the money into the mainstream of the market to then wash it and launder it, as they call it. And this has become important because UAE federal AML legislations have put in key measures for a money laundering reporting officer. It is definitely mandatory. You have to have procedures, policies, systems, and controls around it. And there's even a Go AML website portal now for which every single money laundering reporting officer has to get themselves registered on.
Okay, so it's a mandatory function. So
it is.
What are the implications then for a firm or its MLRO officer if the duties aren't fulfilled correctly?
Wow, extremely serious, because along with what comes with the general penalties for money laundering, the simple act of not reporting is also one that can have serious reputational damage, legal issues, risks financially, because the money laundering officer can become criminally liable for failure to report a suspicious activity or any suspicions they have of money laundering or terrorist financing. So it's embedded in the laws now.
Okay, and do the same rules apply for registered designated non-financial business or other professionals?
Oh, most definitely. It is streamlined across the designated non-financial business persons, DNFBPs, as we nickname it, are the ones that have been seen as quite a vulnerable sector. So those who are real estate developers, dealers in precious metals and stones, law firms, accounting firms like ours, insolvency firms, single family offices, all of those that are classified within that also fall within the same regime and must have a money laundering reporting officer. They have obligations for which they must fulfill in terms of having AML controls and policies.
Okay. And what about the role of LMRO? Can that be outsourced, for example?
Definitely, I wouldn't have a job otherwise. I'm kidding. No, but yes, it is a role that the regulators have allowed to be outsourced. Typically within the financial free zones, and also the MCC and others, what they have allowed is for you to employ an individual that must fulfill certain, of course, number of hours to ensure that there is a robust system and controls in place to manage that arrangement. But yes, it is allowed.
Yeah, and you mentioned that this is something that we do a lot. So why do you think that firms are now turning to outsourcing?
It's several reasons. One, it's an important factor to take into consideration when you're looking at costs for the firm overall. It's associated with not having to do the necessaries for a full-time employee when you have to do visas and end of service benefits and all of those things. Whereas when you have an outsourced firm, you can have a fixed fee basis and they need not take into account all the other necessaries they would for an in-house person. Additionally, they can get that level of support even higher than what they perhaps could afford in-house. So typically someone, for example, of my credence, at my level, you could still get at a fixed cost, but have that level of expertise within your firm to ensure that, you get the benefits from having that level of independence, but at the same time have somebody who you can depend on. It also helps because you not only are you demonstrating independence, you're also managing any potential conflicts that will come around. Most times what happens when a suspicious activity comes up, it's typically, a relationship has been built with an individual or entity. And so that same individual, it's easier for them to report it rather than having to be the one to file and then interact. They can blame compliance and their MLRO and go, okay, it's with compliance and compliance has an issue, so I can't operate with you. Yeah.
Okay.
But then it gives collective experience, and then the quality, allows a lot of discipline within the firm because they become the second line of defense. And so they're always there to ensure that the firm is doing what they need to do.
Excellent. So the golden question, how can Rethink help?
Wow. Well, Rethink as a consultancy, services business provider has quite a bit of expertise in-house that collectively have, I would say, over 15 years of experience. I myself have, 20 years at the bar plus the AML ACAMS qualifications, been trained by the Financial Action Task Force, been trained by World Bank in relation to sanctions. My team has gotten individual training from the Refinitiv, Thomson Reuters and others to ensure that they understand how to use, the tools, new technology in order to assess and screen. The UN sanctions, naturally, of course, they can assimilate what to do when it is time to report. Collectively, we have been very proactive in looking at the whole regulatory requirements. And so for those who don't want to have to go through all the quarterly reporting, an AML return that has to be filed annually, additional AML checks that need to be done, a compliance monitoring program. There are a number of areas for which we would add substantial value to this arrangement and give the client that access to the pool of knowledge that Rethink holds. Naturally, too, we also do training, and where it is that eventually the firm needs to hire someone in-house, we can either sit above that individual to ensure that they're doing what they need to do on a daily basis, or we can train and continually train to ensure that both senior management and their staff are fully aware of what their ML and CFT obligations are. So across the board, I think, at a fixed fee, you do benefit quite a bit from using the consultancy we have. And in addition to that, given, your team as well, we train your team from the finance side. So they also are aware of triggers and areas of vulnerability for ML. And given how we work as a team, it helps because you get that collective resource, you get that collective knowledge, you get that full oversight. And so I think that's where Rethink really is formidable in that regard. We have, over 15, I would say, outsource mandates running between the various free zones, but at the same time, because it is our area of expertise, because we have additional tools and technology that can assist us to be efficient, we're able to take on quite a bit.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Gail, for that. But one last question.
You're welcome. Yeah.
How did somebody get in touch with you and discuss further the values of outsourcing MLO?
Well, our website is there. You can use the contact inquiry form, or in an event, we're on LinkedIn, and so you can make an introduction through there as well. But typically, through even the regulators as well, they have our names listed as one of the consultants in their list that deal with compliance. So there are several ways that you can email us, or my email is very simple. It's gail.goring@rethink. rethink-hq.com. So it's not that hard to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Gail. Appreciate that. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Oh, most welcome. Have a good day ahead, David.
You too.